Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. On Wednesday's episode of Live with Kelly and Mark, Kelly Ripa shared the heartbreaking news of her beloved dog Chewie's passing. The 17-year-old Shih Tzu, who had been a steadfast presence in the lives of Ripa and her husband, Mark Consuelos, was euthanized in their New York City apartment after suffering from health issues. The morning talk show took a poignant turn as Mark Consuelos opened the episode, recounting the emotional goodbye they bid to Chewie the day before. With a visible mix of sadness and resolve, Consuelos explained how the couple faced the heartbreaking decision due to Chewie's declining health, marked by loss of appetite, dehydration, and neurological problems. "It's probably one of the toughest things that we've had to do as a married couple," Consuelos shared. He acknowledged that only fellow pet parents could truly comprehend the depth of such grief. Kelly Ripa, visibly emotional, fought back tears as she recalled the life and times they shared with Chewie. They welcomed the dog into their home after Liv featured her in an adoption segment, making her an integral part of both their family and the show. The couple's children grew up alongside Chewie, and the pup remained a constant presence even as their kids left for college. There are certain moments in life when ordinary rooms become cathedrals, when the mundane light catches at the edges of everything and reveals how fragile and luminous the pieces of a day really are. The apartment Kelly and Mark shared in Manhattan was one of those rooms, an eclectic, lived-in stage where laughter, arguments, and the quiet work of living had been performed for decades. On a cold January morning, it became a place of a quieter ceremony. Chewie had been with them for 17 years. In those years, he had learned every set of footprints in the apartment, had claimed a particular patch of sunlight on the living room rug, and had learned to appear at the very instant a camera light came on. When Kelly first brought him home, after he'd waddled into her life via a segment on Live that had invited viewers to adopt pets, he was a small, curl-furred being whose eyes were older than his body suggested. He was not glamorous. He was a Shih Tzu with a crooked ear and a muzzle already threaded with the faintest silver. But something in Mark and Kelly had rearranged themselves to make space for him immediately. Kids grew up around him. Advertisements were filmed with him snoozing under a table. There were nights of snow when Chewie, bundled in a tiny sweater, refused to step onto the pavement until Mark had assured him that he would return. He knew the cadence of the couple's jokes and the particular ways they whispered to one another when a camera was off. He would hop onto the couch with the practiced precision of a creature for whom certain rituals were sacraments: the evening cuddle, the applause for the dog food can opening, the small ceremonies that meant the day had been successful. He was old for a dog. 17 is a timeline in which bones tire, in which the bright responsiveness of a younger life becomes more like a weathered landscape. In the last months of his days, Chewie had begun to speak in smaller movements, a paw, then a look, then a rigidity at the end of a walk. Kelly noticed things first: the way he did not jump for a treat, how his tail sometimes failed to find rhythm. Mark took photographs and hid them in a folder marked Chewie that neither of them opened more than once every few weeks. They started to measure life in breaths and in small, efficient rituals: warm towels, pills crushed with wet food, the careful coaxing to drink. People who do not love animals sometimes underestimate how vast the grief can be, thinking of a grief that looks like a shallow puddle. But grief for a pet can be an ocean, unbounded, wide, and near immediate. Chewie had been a lodestar. He had been the private actor in a public life. He had watched sitcoms while perched on a human knee. He had attended children's recitals and had slept through rehearsals that had kept the house up until 2 a.m. He had been there when the kids learned to ride a bike and when kisses were mended after first heartbreaks. He was a repository for the sort of domestic gravity that keeps a family.
In the middle of a winter storm, Chewie's appetite faltered. Kelly and Mark were both home. Rare,
a quiet night without the show's bright, fast clip of morning. Chewie, usually keen at the very clink of food against metal, did not flinch. He lay small and dignified, as if conserving himself for some private keeping. They monitored his water bowl, propped him up on heavy towels when his balance wobbled, and consulted the vet, who was fond and frank and gently direct. "There's a neurologic component now," the vet had said over the phone. "He's dehydrated, and it's affecting the appetite. We can try fluids, but at his age, think about quality. Think about the life he remembers." Think about the life he remembers. Those words lodged in the couple, rearranging their priorities. Quality. What would make this life still worth living for him? Was it the power of a treat? The sun on his belly? The hands that smoothed him? They arranged for the vet to come to the apartment when the decision became necessary. It was one of those conversations you think will be clinical and that you can inhabit with courage, like a costume you can take on and take off. It was not. It was a river that caught both of them and moved them along. "People who have pets know," Mark told Kelly in the hush after the phone call. "They know." They tried everything that week. They drew up warmed soup-like broths, coaxed him with the smell of chicken, and took him on short walks, each movement measured and blessed. But Chewie continued to lose weight. He would stand at the threshold of rooms, look, and then decide not to cross. His bright, small brown eyes lost their focus sometimes. At night, Kelly sat on the floor and cradled him like a child falling asleep, whispering stories as if words might patch the frayed places in his body. In the course of 2 days, after a vigil of sorts, of hot towels, hydrating syringes, and a bouquet of old toys, Kelly and Mark made the decision to have him euthanized. The vet would come to their apartment and offer grace where options ran out. The word itself felt like a cliff, clinical and tender all at once, a kind of last letter written with care. They had done it in private, the way you would do a small religious rite in a small church, a single room, an old friend held, hands that had weathered everything. Mark carried Chewie to the couch, while Kelly arranged his favorite blanket. They preferred the apartment, the place where the light was familiar and where the dog had chosen his spots. The vet arrived with a soft-knuckled gravity. The couple whispered, and the vet worked with the patience of someone who had done this many times. Chewie slept his last hours in the middle of the people who had loved him into a long life. The morning after, the producers of Live were waiting, lights calibrated, and Mark sat at the desk with a look on his face that told everyone that he had just lived an epiphany of sorrow. He began the show in a way that the writer's notes would tell you was unscripted, with a small, clear recounting of what they had done the day before, of the choice they had been forced to make. He spoke of Chewie as if speaking of a person whose life had been entire and whose absence would be felt like a missing limb. "It's probably one of the toughest things that we've had to do as a married couple," he said, voice low and steady. The audience, trained in the rhythms of morning television and used to the light banter of celebrity life, sat forward. The cameras flattened. For a moment, the television room became more than a studio, an amphitheater of feeling.